Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into how one of the most powerful ideas of the 20th century, Mahatma Gandhi's Satyagraha, wasn't just a philosophy. It was a weapon, really, a tool for justice that he forged in the fires of three crucial early battles right across India. So, Satyagraha. You've probably heard it translated as truth force or passive resistance. And yeah, it's this incredibly powerful concept of nonviolent resistance that would eventually challenge an entire empire. But here's the thing, it didn't just appear out of nowhere fully formed. Nope. It had to be tested, it had to be refined, and it really had to be proven where it counts, on the ground. So, the big question is, how did this world-changing idea actually come to be? Well, the answer isn't what you might think. It wasn't born in some huge nationwide movement. It was actually forged in three small local struggles. Think of them as the laboratory for a revolution. All right, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at his first big test in a place called Champaran. Then, we'll see how he switched things up for strikes and tax revolts. And finally, we'll see how all these small wins led to a massive nationwide protest and the tragedy that came with it. You'll see how with each step, the stakes got higher and his strategy got sharper. Okay, let's set the scene. The year is 1917. We're in this remote district called Champaran. And this is where a super persistent farmer, a guy named Raj Kumar Shukla, literally tracks Gandhi down across the country. He was convinced, absolutely convinced, that Gandhi was the only person who could help them take down this oppressive system that had been crushing them for decades. So what was the problem? Well, it was this really nasty system called tinkathia. And for generations, European planters had been forcing the local farmers to grow indigo on the best parts of their land. I mean, imagine that. You're forced to grow a cash crop for someone else on your best soil, leaving you with scraps to grow food for your own family. It was a totally one-sided deal, only making the planters rich. Yeah, 3/20ths of their land. But here's where it gets even crazier. German scientists invent synthetic dyes, and suddenly natural indigo is pretty much worthless. So you'd think the planters would just end the contracts, right? Wrong. Instead, they demanded these massive, totally illegal fees from the peasants just to be released from the obligation to grow a crop that nobody wanted anymore. It was just pure extortion. And this is where Gandhi's approach was just completely different. It was genius. First, the authorities tell him, get out of the district. What does he do? He just calmly says no, and that he's ready to go to jail. I mean, just that simple act of defiance was mind-blowing at the time. But he didn't stop there. He wasn't just about making a scene. He and his team, they spent months going from village to village collecting and verifying over 8,000 testimonies from the peasants. He wasn't just protesting. He was building a rock-solid case legally and morally that you just couldn't argue with. So what was the result of all this work? Well, the government was basically forced to listen. They got rid of the tinkathia system, and they ordered the planters to refund some of the money they'd illegally taken. Now, the farmers only got 25% back, which might not sound like a total win, but Gandhi, he saw the bigger picture. The real victory wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that for the very first time, these peasants had stood up to their oppressors and won. It completely shattered the planters' prestige, their power. And you know what? Within a decade, they were gone. They'd all left the district. So, fresh off this incredible victory in Champaran, Gandhi barely has time to catch his breath before he's pulled into two new conflicts, this time back in his home state of Gujarat. And these were different. He wasn't dealing with farmers and foreign planters anymore. Now it was industrial strikes and tax revolts. He had to figure out how to adapt Satyagraha for totally new kinds of fights. Okay, first up was a textile mill strike in Ahmedabad. And you can see the dispute right here. The owners wanted to get rid of this thing called a plague bonus. But the workers were like, no way. The cost of living has skyrocketed because of the war. We need a 35% wage increase just to get by. And this is where it gets really interesting personally. Gandhi, of course, sided with the workers. But the main mill owner? He was a close friend of Gandhi's. And get this, the person leading the strike right alongside Gandhi was the owner's own sister. Talk about complicated. So the strike goes on, and you know how these things go. People start to lose hope, their resolve starts to weaken. And this is when Gandhi pulls out a new tactic, something really powerful, the fast. And he was super clear about this. This wasn't a hunger strike to try and guilt trip or coerce the owners, not at all. It was for the workers. It was an act of solidarity, his way of saying, I am with you and I am willing to suffer with you. And man, did it work. It completely re-energized them. Okay, so while all this is happening in the city, literally at the exact same time, farmers in the nearby Kheda district are in serious trouble. Their crops had failed, which, under the law, meant they should have gotten a break on their land taxes, a tax remission. But the government? They just said no. They flat out refused their legal appeals. So Gandhi shows up, and this time he has a sharp young lawyer with him named Vallabhbhai Patel. You'll hear that name again. And their advice to the farmers was beautifully simple and incredibly powerful. Just don't pay, stand firm, and withhold the tax. They organized the whole district around this one idea, based on that fundamental principle you see here. You can't govern people without their consent. If the people say no, the government's power just evaporates. So let's just step back and look at this chain of events. 1917, Champaran. Civil disobedience takes down an unjust system. 1918, Ahmedabad. A strike and a fast win the workers a huge wage increase. Also in 1918, Kheda. A tax revolt forces the government to back down. 1, 2, 3. In just a couple of years, Gandhi had racked up 3 massive wins. Using this flexible set of tools, he had a proven method, a national reputation, and he was ready. It was time to take this fight to the national stage. And that stage arrived in 1919. The British government introduces what became known as the Rowlatt Bills. And these were just terrible laws that basically allowed them to imprison any Indian without a trial, all in the name of fighting terrorism. You have to understand, after all the sacrifices Indians had made during World War I, this felt like a slap in the face, a total betrayal. So the usual political appeals, petitions, speeches, they all failed. And that's when Gandhi called for something truly unprecedented, something on a scale that India had never, ever seen before. He called for a nationwide hartal, a complete shutdown. No work, no business, just fasting and prayer. Satyagraha was officially going national. But things didn't go as planned. The movement that actually exploded onto the scene was way more volatile, way more violent than Gandhi had ever imagined. And this was especially true in the region of Punjab, where years of harsh British rule during the war and outbreaks of disease had left people's anger just simmering right below the surface. It was a powder keg. And the spark that lit that powder keg was in the city of Amritsar. The British arrested 2 popular local leaders, and that set off some violent protests. The army was called in, and command of the city was handed over to this man, General Dyer. His first move? He banned any and all public meetings. Period. So it's April 13th, the day of a major Sikh festival, Baisakhi. A huge, peaceful crowd gathers in this walled garden called Jallianwala Bagh. You have to picture it. It's a festive atmosphere. A lot of these people were families, visiting from nearby villages who had absolutely no idea that public meetings had been banned. Then General Dyer shows up with his troops. He blocks the only real exit, a narrow passageway. And without a single word of warning, he orders his soldiers to fire into the trapped crowd. And they just keep firing for 10 straight minutes into a crowd of unarmed men, women, and children. The official British government estimate was 379 people killed. Indian estimates put the number much, much higher, closer to 1,000. But honestly, the exact number almost doesn't matter. It was the sheer brutality, the cold-blooded, calculated nature of the act that just sent this shockwave of pure horror and rage across the entire nation. Gandhi was horrified, just overwhelmed by the violence that had erupted, not just in Amritsar, but in other parts of the country too. And just 5 days later, he made the difficult decision to call the whole thing off. He called off the Satyagraha. It must have been a painful thing to do. Basically an admission that the people weren't yet ready for the kind of discipline that a true nonviolent mass movement required. But you can't look at this as just a failure. Far from it. These early struggles, even the tragic ones, they were the foundation for everything that came next. They gave Gandhi a much clearer understanding of the people, their incredible strengths, but also their weaknesses. He proved that his political style could work, and maybe most importantly, the wrong inflicted on Punjab, as he called it, the massacre at Jallianwala Bagh, it didn't break the movement. It became its rallying cry. It gave them a powerful moral cause that would fuel the much larger struggles to come. So in the end, the tragedy wasn't an ending, it was a catalyst. Those small local victories proved the method could work. The great experiment, the Mahatma's Indian experiment, had well and truly begun. And the lessons learned in these first crucial fights? Well, they would go on to shape a movement that would not only bring down an empire, but would also offer a whole new way of fighting for justice to the entire world.